And there we are live. Good day and welcome back to another episode of the Air Force podcast. My name is Jaco and today we have got Adrian Burrows with us. Thanks a lot for being here, Adrian. Thanks a lot for your time today.
Hey, Yako, how you doing? Thanks very much for having me here. It's great to be online with you.
Adrian, can you tell us about a bit of your military experience, your military background that you have had, and up to, I would say, we are now doing this kind of military trainings. Just sort of just tell me from the beginning.
Okay, well, the beginning actually starts off while I was still a schoolboy. I grew up in the UK, as you can probably hear from my Pommy accent. And in this, some of the schools in the UK, they have a thing called the Combined Cadet Force, where you actually join up in normally specifically the Army or the Air Force, and you start learning about how to be a soldier, for example, while you're still at school. You're immersing yourself in the system. So I started with that in the Combined Cadet Force. Right out of school, I didn't go straight into the military side of things. I actually became a professional martial artist. Did that for a couple of years, but then got involved in the UK Territorial Army Infantry Unit. There for a few years. There wasn't a whole lot going on back in that time. And during that time, I decided I wanted to actually leave the country and come to South Africa. And originally, I came out here to join the military here. That didn't happen for one reason or another. My choices. I got into the security field, strangely enough, as I was qualified as a close protection officer, and then later on got involved again in the military. I was involved with the SAPS for several years. And then I got a phone call asking me to go out to Madagascar to go and train and recruit the new Presidential Guard Regiment. So went out there, trained up the unit completely from scratch. And then I was asked by the president to join the unit itself. So I got into the military over there in the Presidential Guard Regiment and did several years there. Tasked with the protection of the head of state. Then from there, a former colleague of mine pulled me into Iraq, where the global war on terror was at its height there in terms of the Iraq war. It was crazy. It was the Wild West, and so got back into that, which was just like being in the military again, but being paid better. So loved it out there. Fantastic experience. I was doing Department of State and Department of Defense work for the US government by a private military company, and then shifted over to Afghanistan. Spent 9 years in Afghanistan, also doing DOS, DOD stuff. Started as the QRF commander at the US Embassy in Kabul. Went on to be a team leader, then the senior team leader in another protective operation, which was countrywide. Ended up as the project manager there. Got into the senior management side. That program came to an end. It ran its natural course, and then I moved over to another one. Went back as a team leader again. Very interestingly, it was called the RSSA program, which was private military contractors protecting elements of the US military, in which this case was the US Army Corps of Engineers. And that was the largest program in Afghanistan at the time. Literally, we had ground assets, air assets, you name it, we had it. And started once again as a team leader there, and ended up as the deputy program director. So everything operational fell under my purview. That one ran its course, and then I fancied a change. So I went back to Iraq for a while. Didn't enjoy it quite so much that time, and then had a complete change. Went over to South Sudan. I spent about 8 years going back and forth to South Sudan. Obviously, there's been a war there in recent years, which has more recently come to a more peaceful situation. And then last year, I spent most of that in the Ukraine and surrounding European countries, also working for, it's international organizations for the US government. And that brings us to now.
But that is quite a CV. That is actually a huge portfolio that you have been through. A lot of things you have seen, a lot of things you have experienced, and in all of those sites, all of the countries you visited, which did you think has made the biggest impact on your life? What experience did you think was the thing that kind of turned your life around, or had a big impact on you?
I don't think I could say that one thing in particular. So if I might allude to a couple of things, I think first of all, the Madagascar experience was very, very profound because it exposed me to an aspect of the business which is in one way the sort of the highest level of the business, doing presidential protection. But that's what we call close protection, which is quite different to the protective security we did in the global war on terror, which was far more sort of in-your-face military type protection. But coming back to Madagascar, I think the thing there was it opened me to something that I felt more there than anything else, which was a sense of serving something greater than myself. I was working for a president who grew up with no shoes on his feet, who was completely self-educated, self-made, became the richest man in the country, became the president of the country, and he was out there working day and night for his country and for the people who were impoverished the same way as he was when he was growing up. So that had a tremendous effect on me in terms of a sense of purpose. Operationally, I would say it was Iraq and then Afghanistan were the two big things in terms of operating continually for many, many years on end in an environment which was so non-permissive, where you're totally immersed in that life-death existence, which could change at any second of every day. So I think in terms of operationally, I grew as a person during those sort of 10 years or so. And I had the great pleasure of working with the people that I worked with, and I'm certainly a better at my job as a result of doing that. And I'm a better person for having done that, actually.
And at what age were you recruited by Madagascar? How old were you?
I was in my 30s. I think it was early 30s. Don't remember exactly.
So you were
so
still
I had,
quite young when you did that.
yeah, sort of physically, you're sort of at your peak. I was probably about 33, 34, something like that. Yeah. But of course, then operationally, there was a lot more to come. I was ready for the job, but I learned so much more through doing it and then afterwards and going on to doing other things.
Okay. And then while being in Madagascar, and you working with the president and working with, what do I say correctly, the guards of the president, is that what it actually is?
Well, the Presidential Guard Regiment is an all-arms regiment, so it's drawn from all aspects of the armed services, and it's then split into various entities. So there's a close protection element, there's an anti-terrorist element, there's a reconnaissance element, and there's a intelligence element. And those all form parts of the specialist battalion, which was where I was. So I was specifically in the close protection element of that.
Okay. And you also mentioned that that had impact on your life, seeing how the president was a self-made man. What kind of skills and mentality do you think people in your position has to have to achieve what you have achieved? To go out there, see the things you have seen. What kind of mentality do you have, and what skills do people need to be there and to overcome all of those different things that you have experienced?
Well, you have to have a high level of hard skills. That's for sure, and that's probably the thing that most people relate to when they see someone in my profession, is that you have empty hand skills, you have shooting skills, you have tactical skills, and those are things that you work on all the time in the hope that you never have to use them. Those skills diminish very, very quickly. So you're constantly trying to keep them up and improve them if you can. However, most of the time you're not using those skills. You're prepared and ready to use them, but you're using softer skills, which is planning skills, planning operations, adjusting to changes in the operational plans, dealing with your clientele, which is massively different than dealing with your team and dealing with people in the military infrastructure. So dealing with politicians is, man, that's a game all on its own that you've got to learn, and it's a tricky, man, that's a dirty place, politics. So yeah, dealing with politics, dealing with people who are totally different to you. I mean, dealing with for example, when I was in Afghanistan, we were dealing on one of the programs with guys who were all correctional officers. So they were more in lines, they spoke more of the same language that we did. We had a program, we were working with the DEA, the US Drug Enforcement Agency. They were much more along the lines that we were doing, but there was a political aspect to it as well. But then when you're dealing with an NGO worker, that's completely different. So you have to have the soft skills to be able to deal with a broad range of people and to be able to communicate with them in a way which is going to make them want to comply with what you need. Because most of the time what you're doing is you're actually, in order to assure their safety, you're having to stop them doing some of the things that they want to do them, or at least restrict them in a way. So it's all about gaining compliance and finding a middle ground by where your operation achieves its objectives and it mitigates threat to an acceptable level, but at the same time the client has their mission to accomplish as well. They need to get to places, so it's getting the balance between facilitating both.
Okay, and with that balance and being able to, I would say, lead people and I don't want to use the word control people, but steering them into the right direction. Uh, what skills do you need there? What kind of interpersonal skills do you also need to do the things that you do? Because everything isn't hard. Everything isn't the all physical shooting. Um,
Yeah.
as you said, there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of people skills involved. What do you think is the most important one?
I think to a degree you have to understand how different people tick, what makes them think, what makes them understand. And you have to combine that with managing to get that person to trust you, because that person has to trust you in order to possibly shift them from what they were originally going to do to make those compromises, but also to, when you get a situation where you have to go to that person and just say no, they need to trust you that that's absolutely the best thing for them to do in that situation. So that's something that takes time to build up. And of course, you generally do it by your personality. You can't force people to do things, particularly people like heads of state. You're not forcing him to do anything because he's the boss, he's the commander in chief. But if you can bring logic and reasoning to the situation and develop the personal relationship where you can have open and direct conversations, then it really works all about doing that.
Okay. And then how did you transition from the military and doing all the things military related to providing this, you call it kinetic training solutions, and that is one of military style training, military style self-defense, if I'm correct.
It is, but I offer a far broader range of services than just military type training. I mean, just to step back a little bit, I'd done training my whole life. I literally started training people when I was in school, and I've just done it as I call it a vocational part of my career right the way through. Everywhere that I've been involved in training, and that has involved a broad spectrum of people in a broad spectrum of organizations. So Kinetic Solutions training was conceived in order to bring real world training, real world experience to a broad spectrum of people. So we literally train from, let's say, a lady who's just got her first firearm and she's at a complete basics fundamentals level, right the way through to military special forces and everything in between. So there are things that I would not teach to civilians. There are things that I wouldn't waste the military's time with trying to teach them with. So it is a broad spectrum of training, and also we do consultancy and risk management as well.
Okay. So at this moment, you're still training some military forces as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
In South Africa.
Yes, and other countries.
And other countries. Okay, so you haven't completely pushed that aside and focused only on normal people and civilians. So you're still doing that, and okay, but with that, why do you still keep on doing that? Is it something that you cannot leave, or
it's part of me.
Training the civilians is training the civilians just I would say the part on the side. What did you say? Where is that balance?
Look, I'm passionate about all of it, but obviously when I'm dealing with military and law enforcement people, I'm dealing with people who speak my own language. We're a bit of a different breed, and it's great. It's like that's home, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And that's the group that I feel most at home and comfortable with. But the other thing is, as well as, you're dealing with people who are at the tip of the spear. You're dealing with people who are bringing everything that they've got to their game every single day when they're operational. So it is high stakes. It is life and death, and that's where I really enjoy it the most. And obviously, you're dealing with people that the people that I train are at a higher level as well, and it's in the same way as it's a pleasure to take a beginner and see that person evolve. It's equally a pleasure to work with someone who's already at a really high level and see how you can help them to evolve further as well.
Okay, and that actually leads to my next question. With you said a lady maybe getting her first firearm, and how do you deal with people that isn't as like you said, they aren't as evolved, they aren't on the same level as like you are? How do you deal with them? Isn't that a bit frustrating to learn people? And you also said that the guys in the military already is at the highest level. They are committed. They have to do this every day to survive. And other people are just like getting into training, maybe just trying to find a few things out. Isn't as committed. How do you balance that? How do you approach that? Because that is obviously what can happen.
Yeah, it's a shift in mindset when you do it. It's not that it's any better or any worse. It's just different, and the way you train people is very, very different. So, for example, if you took a normal infantryman in the military, the way he's been taught is stand there, shut up, listen, do what I tell you. This is the way we do it. This is why we do it. Don't ask questions. You get up to the higher levels now in the specialized units, and those are the guys who are the best of the best from their units, and they're going to ask questions. So it's different again to teach them, because now they're going to ask questions, they're going to ask why, and you better damn well have the answer to what they're asking, otherwise you've lost your credibility. Yeah. Then you change over completely to let's say the example of what you were saying. We take a lady, she's got her first firearm. I'm equally as passionate about empowering that person as I am about empowering a military person. But that person, for example, first of all needs to feel comfortable with me. That person needs to feel that like they can trust me, that I am giving them the information that they need. And they also need to understand that I'm patient. I'm not getting irritable just because they can't do it at the same speed as somebody else can. So it's just a little bit of a difference in mindset where you have to take a softer, more gentle approach and obtain that person's trust and attain a level of comfort that they have with you to be able to keep moving forward at their own pace, because everyone's pace is different. The one thing I always remember, though, is that these people are my clients. It's not like being in the forces where you can shout and scream, and if you have a bad day, it doesn't matter. They're your clients, and they're paying you for a service, and they deserve the best that you have. So I try and do that, and part of that is the way that I approach those people and the demeanor that I use to help empower them, because that's what it's all about. It's about empowering people.
And then how do you tailor the kind of training that you provide from somebody that just got their first weapon to somebody maybe that is in the defense force and then on the special forces? How do you tailor the training you give to each individual and each of the team's needs?
Yeah, that's a great question. It starts off with a bunch of questions. So I need to know about these people. I need to know what's the application of what they're doing. So, for example, if I'm teaching a military unit, I need to know, what are they going to be doing? Are they going to be doing normal battlefield warfare, conventional battlefield warfare? Are they going to be up against asymmetric warfare? Are they going to be operating in an urban environment where the engagement distance are much, much closer? Or are they going to be in a rural environment where the distances of engagement are much, much further? If it's on a civilian side, am I dealing with a security officer who's working CIT, who's going to be involved in mobile security, and his likelihood of being attacked is quite high? Or am I going to be dealing with just your average person who wants to commit to a certain degree in terms of taking responsibility for their own safety and security? Or are they actually dead keen and they want to go a long way? So I need to basically know where they're coming from, what they want to achieve, what levels they're at, what are their objectives, and I custom build to a degree the course that I'm doing for that. In the civilian market, it's, unless you're doing private tuition, which I do quite a bit of, and in which that's completely bespoke. You're building it around what that client wants or that small group of client wants. But generally in the civilian market, you put on a course, let's say it's defensive pistol, and it's a set curriculum, and they come and they learn that curriculum and they choose it according to where they are, whether they're at a basic, fundamental, intermediate, advanced level, so on and so forth.
Okay. And then how do you think it, I would say the rewarding aspect of the training that you give, do you think that people on the highest level gives a bit less of that rewarding that you have a trainer, you as a trainer receive, or do you think training somebody from the start, getting the first weapon is more rewarding? What do you think? What gives you that rewarding feeling, saying, okay, we have accomplished this, or is it also again each to their own?
It's different, and I enjoy both. If I get a complete beginner, somebody comes to me, they've only got a competency level of training, and now I'm trying to teach them how to use that pistol as a weapon for self-defense. Sometimes I get somebody who can barely hit the target when they start in the morning. But then by the time they've done an 8-hour course with me, now they're hitting the target every time. And instead of shooting a group like this, they're now shooting a group like that. So that's a sense of achievement for me as a trainer, but it's also a sense of achievement for them as an individual. And you can see it when they walk off the range saying, geez, I never thought I could do this. I didn't know what I could do, how I could do it. And in a period of, relatively just a few hours, they can make significant improvements. So that to me is just as rewarding. It's just the terms of reference are different depending on who you're training.
Okay. How does a basic training day looks like on, I would say, on this kind of groups, or I would say group classes, or training classes that you give? What is the average day? What is the typical day look like? How do you start? You go through the process with me.
Um, I mean, typically what I would do is it starts off with a welcome, and people are welcome when they come to me because I love doing what I'm doing, and obviously that's my job, and they're my clients. But then I typically start off with explaining what they're going to be doing during that particular course for that day. If it's a multi-day course, we're going to cover what we'll do specifically on that part, that evolution of the longer training course. And then if it is the first time that they're on the range with me, then I try to find out a little bit about who they are and why they're there. What's their objective in being there? And then I explain to them what they can expect from me during that course and the objectives that I'm going to try and help them achieve during that time period. After that, it always goes to a safety brief, because safety, when you're working with firearms in particular, is above everything else. So we go through the rules of safety. I make sure they understand the rules of safety, because typically I would say that most people, unless they've done prior training at a good level, most people have, let's say they're not as safe as they really should be when it comes to weapons. So they need to understand what the safety rules are, not just in terms of the law, but the range etiquette, and why we do it, because the bottom line is we're trying to avoid accidents. When bullets come out of guns, they can do a lot of damage, and we just don't want that because it's permanent damage. And then from there, we get into the training course itself. I use a building blocks method where I start with a basic layer. Once I see that it's being understood and they can perform it, move on to another layer, and then another, and then another. And then generally I stop, Q&A, make sure everyone understands what they're doing, get their comments, and then we work throughout the day. At the end of the day, we'll do a recap, go over all the things that they've done, and then have a bit of a debrief. Okay, guys, what have you learned? Tell me what you've learned. Tell me what you've taken away from the course. Tell me what you enjoyed about the course, because that's my debrief to make me better at what I do and to allow me to evolve and constantly give a better product to my students as I go along. So it's not just important for them to evolve, I have to evolve as well. And then, yeah, that would generally wrap it up. And questions and answers, and then off we go, and until the next time.
And then what kind of misconceptions are there around the training that you provide that you would like to rectify and get out to the public that isn't actually correct, that isn't actually what is happening?
Man, that's a really good question, and it's really important. And I'm going to address misconceptions in general about the let's call it the tactical industry, the training industry itself, because in one sense it's in the best place that it ever has been, and equally, and for the same reasons, it's in the worst place that it ever has been. And this is all to do with social media. So with social media, there is now far more information out there than there's ever been. And it's so readily available. You just got to get on your computer, get on YouTube, whatever search engine you want, and it's out there. The problem with that is that there is a relatively small amount of good information in terms of the type of training available and tactics, techniques, procedures, but there's a massive amount of bad information. And social media, I believe, is something we could do without in terms of the firearms industry, because people are being fooled by it. People are being fooled by what I call entertainment, and they're seeing something which they see tactics, for example, and techniques being shown, and they sort of say, "Oh yeah, that's cool," and they want to be like that because the guy looks the part and he talks the part and he moves the part. But because they're there to learn and they're not subject matter experts themselves, they're getting fooled because some of the stuff that's being taught out there is actually doesn't work. And anybody with any kind of long-term operational experience would have the discernment to look at it and say, no, no, that ain't happening. That's going to get people killed. So I think that's where most of the misconceptions are, is that people see something and it looks cool, so they think that it's good. Whereas in reality, in real combat, it's not the things that look cool. It's just the things that work, and they generally don't look cool. So what I would say to people in terms of if they're looking to train, and there are good trainers out there. I'm not trying by any means to say that I'm the only guy, because I'm not. But you've got to look at what's that person done, not what does that person look like, and your perception of what he looks like. What has that person done? Look at the person's bio, their CV. Now, there again, anyone can write whatever they want on a CV. It can be the biggest load of rubbish out there. It's not about what's just on the CV. What can you prove? My bio's on my website. You can look at it. The photographs are there. Everything's there for you to see that I've been there and I've done that as I say it. And if you can't find that after digging deeply on a training institution, then I would say to you it's probably not out there, and you're not going to be getting reality-based training. So to come back to your question, the misconceptions are mainly around social media, which give a false impression of what will work and what doesn't work. And then you've got to dig past that and really do a bit of homework before you train with somebody, and make sure that they are what they say they are and they're purporting to be a subject matter expert. Subject matter expertise comes from the lens of years and years and years of operational experience, because then you have the discernment to know what works and what doesn't. The other misconception that I'm seeing, and then it's also geared towards social media as well, is to an extent, I find people are being lured by almost a glorification of violence, of criminality to a degree. So I hear a lot of stuff like, "Oh, it's an ambush. You're going to be ambushed. The criminals are ambushing." It's not an ambush. People just die in ambushes. That's why people ambush. A car hijacking is not an ambush. If it's an ambush, their objective is to kill you, and you're going to die in the front seat of your car. It's as simple as that. Car hijackings, for example, are not ambushes, they're attacks. It's just an attack, and that person is using their firearms as a means to gain your compliance. So I'm finding, particularly for sort of your average red-blooded male, who, let's face it, we'd all like to be somebody special. By using these terminology, it's luring people in to do a certain kind of training because they think they will be able to emulate that kind of person. But it's not all about that. Attacks, criminality, it's down, it's dirty, it's horrible, it's not enjoyable, there's no glory in it. And the way to get out of it is to stick with basic principles and apply them in a logical manner.
Yes, okay. And then, what kind of fitness and strength training do you do, and did you do when you were younger? As you said, when you were like 33, you were at your peak performance. And what kind of fitness training did you do, and do you still do?
My training is different now. I mean, I think we need to understand the difference between military training and other types of training, because military training is got a completely different objective. It's more about endurance with discomfort, carrying heavy weights over long distances, walking to an objective, pushing through continual pain and discomfort, as a method of building resilience. That's really what military training is all about. Whereas for civilians, and I would say law enforcement as well, and unless it's at a really high level unit, That's not what the objective is. So these days, I'm not going to strap 30 kilos on my back and go and walk 20 kilometers up the side of the Drakensberg. I don't need to. That's not what I'm most likely to get involved in. So from a civilian side, it's less endurance and it's more about agility. For civilian scenarios and most law enforcement scenarios, life-threatening incidents are very quick. So it's all about being able to react quickly and react decisively. So we're not looking for endurance, we're looking for agility. And we've combined that agility with a level of tactical thinking and hard skills to be able to respond. In the case of shooting, for example, you need to be able to shoot very fast and very accurate. So it's very, very different to how it was then and how it is now. Also now I'm older. I'm not in my peak. I can't move around like I did when I was in my 30s. So it's a question for me personally is, okay, what can I do now to offset that deficit because I have slowed down a little bit? How can I improve and maintain and improve myself in other areas?
Okay. And then now you mentioned you have to have the agility, you have to think fast, react fast.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of other skills do you develop? And should people develop to through the courses and through the training that you give to
Mm-hmm.
actually be able to defend themselves in that kind of life-threatening situation?
Yeah. Most important thing is awareness.
Mm.
And the precepts of awareness are quite basic, but you have to go out there and practice it and bring it into your everyday existence, because without awareness, you're going to get caught off guard. With awareness, you can very often see something before it happens and put measures into place to try and avoid it. So awareness is the cornerstone actually of all security, whether you're on the battlefield or whether you're just a normal civilian walking in the street trying not to get robbed, not to get hijacked, and so on and so forth. So if people understand how awareness works, if people understand to a degree how the human brain works, the processes it follows in terms of you as a innocent person, a potential victim, and also as well as the criminal and how the criminal mind works. If you can combine those things with a level of skill to be able to defend yourself, then you've got an extremely good chance of not only surviving a life-threatening incident, but actually spending the rest of your life not getting into one. That's first prize. First prize is nothing happens to you for the rest of your life, and you live just a normal life, but you've always been prepared. So yeah, awareness, mindset, being ready if you need to. Those are just as important, if not more important, than the hard skills which back it up.
Okay. And then with that, you get that awareness, you have all of that skills. Do you develop this kind of self-confidence and confidence that something isn't as probable to happen with you, or what do you say about something like that?
Yeah, most definitely. With your hard skills, you develop a confidence with whatever that weapon platform is, whether it's your empty hands, let's say if you're learning MMA, whether it's a firearm, whether it's a knife, whether it's another defensive tool. And when you train that to a high level, you do develop a confidence because that defensive tool just becomes an extension of your own hand. So it's a knowledge that you can respond if you need to respond. Then the psychological aspect to it, the awareness and preparedness that we were talking about, also is something that you're ready psychologically for something to happen. And that doesn't mean that you're paranoid and you're walking down the street waiting for bad guys behind every corner. It's just that, no, I'm aware, I'm taking things in, I'm going to see things before they happen, and I'm going to immediately put plans into place so that I can avoid if I can, but if I really have to, I know how to fight. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, that makes sense. And what kind of skills do you think should everybody learn in order to like defend themselves and um what skills, what strategies would you say is essential for every person on the
I think every person has a responsibility to themselves to be able to protect themselves and their loved ones, anyone they place under their protection. I don't believe that it's a responsibility that we should be transferring to security companies or to the police or whatever. I mean, I'm not knocking the police in any way, and I never will because I'm a former member. But let's face it, they're overwhelmed, and the police are probably not coming in any meaningful time frame to be able to help you. So the responsibility is on you, and I think the bare bones of that responsibility is to have a defensive tool and commit to learning and perfecting the use of that that defensive tool is something that they need to bring into their lifestyle. Now, that might be a gun, a knife, it might be empty hands, all the things that I've mentioned before. But I believe that everybody should have that means of protecting themselves or protecting someone they choose to put under their own protection. And I just think that's a social responsibility that we need to have. We live in an amazing country. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the UK, but I'm not leaving South Africa. I think it's the best country in the world, but it's also one of the most dangerous countries in the world. That's the reality. And if you want to stay here, get with the program and take responsibility for your own security. And that means having a means to defend yourself. And also not just a means to defend yourself, but a means to avoid being in situations if you can avoid them. A choice to pick your battles. For example, we've got, I think, the highest carjacking rate in the world. So if you haven't gone out there and at least learned something about anti-carjacking, you've probably fallen short of your own responsibilities to yourself because it's out there. And it's not rocket science to go and learn how it happens, where it happens, and when it happens, and what to do about it. You can learn it probably online in half a dozen different places. You can read about it, or you can go and do a day course. So I believe you need to invest some time in yourself and in your own self-defense, your own ability to protect yourself. And if you're not, then I don't think you're really having a realistic outlook on life in South Africa at the moment.
okay. And there's a thing in the spotlight now, Krav Maga, and it's like also a self-defense technique, self-defense training. What do you think about that? What do you think about things that teach people there? And what is your opinion on that?
Specifically on Krav Maga?
Specifically on that? Or
Okay,
do you have a broader answer for me?
no, I just wanted to know if it was specific to that. I mean, look,
Okay.
there's a lot of different martial arts around, and when I was a professional martial artist, mine was mainly revolving around kickboxing. Today things are different. Krav Maga is an Israeli system that was designed to teach soldiers originally, and it's taken off and it's got into the private sector. I've done a bit of it, but I haven't done a lot of it, so I don't think I'm in a position to make any sort of broad sweeping judgments on it, good or bad. But I would say from what I've seen, it's definitely one of the better options out there for self-defense because it is designed for combat. It's not designed to look cool. It's not designed for sport. And that's not to say that martial arts which are designed for sport are bad either. They've still got their place. So I think it's up there as one of the choices that I would say to people when they've asked me where should I go, and it's up there with MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well, and those are other options as well.
Okay.
So from what I've seen of it, I think it's good, but I'm definitely don't have any level of expertise in it.
Okay. And what is your future? What is the future for you now? What is your next goal? What is the next thing you want to achieve? What is the future? What does the future hold in for you?
I love to travel. I love different cultures and interacting with them. So I think what I'd really like to do is to keep expanding kinetic solutions on the international market, to get into more countries, not just in Africa but throughout the world, and to spread it in that sphere as well as the local market as well.
Okay. And then, where can people find you, connect with you, reach out to you, get a hold of you? You mentioned you got a website. Please tell me.
Yeah, the easiest way really is if you go to the website, which is www.kineticsolutionstraining.com. There's a contact page in there, and you can reach me there. Otherwise, if people go onto my Instagram page, which is kinetic.solutions.training, you can DM me directly from there, and I think there's a WhatsApp link on it that's there. So yeah, just reach out to me on any of those platforms. I'm pretty responsive. If I'm traveling internationally, sometimes it can take a day for me to get back to you. So so please don't think I'm ignoring you or being rude if I don't get back within an hour. But yeah, go to those platforms. You can get an idea of what I do and how I do it, and that's the easiest way to get to me.
Okay. And then to all the listeners, to all the people listening now, go to him, go follow him, go check his website, see the work that he's doing. He's doing exceptional work. So go and like, subscribe, follow, all that kind of stuff. And then, Adrian, thanks a lot for today. Thanks for your time today. Thanks a lot for giving us some of your insights, your experiences, and all of the things I wouldn't say all of the things, but some of the things you have seen, experienced. So thanks a lot for that. Thanks a lot for today.
Thank you very much. It's been great to be here. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Okay.